find ourselves in a place which is not unsurprising because of how this all started. It was a political play. It was badly thought out. There was no plan. We've ended up here by accident with a withdrawal agreement that gives up control. I've never seen any legal draft that actually has 31st of December 20XX in it.
And we've had almost 15 studies since the referendum on why people ended up voting leave. And they all tell a remarkably consistent story, that the vote was driven by two key factors. One was the desire for sovereignty, and the second was to lower immigration and to reform the free movement of EU nationals.
As one of your members of the European Parliament, I find it extremely frustrating that I cannot even initiate legislation. All legislation in the European Parliament has to come through the Commission. It goes to the Council, it goes to the Parliament. You very much end up with something very close to what the European Commission proposed in the first place.
We see an awful lot of people saying that anything but the hardest of Brexit is inconsistent with the will of the people as expressed in the referendum. But what that does is reduces Parliament from being an independent decision maker for the UK to being something more like a court, just restricted to interpreting the will or what other people meant by decisions when they took it. The problem is that if we interpret Brexit, the decision of the people to leave the European Union, you're interpreting an impossibly vague instruction. Parliament is still entitled to wide discretion in choosing the form of Brexit it wants. It's absurd to claim that 52% of people were firmly against, for example, the membership of the customs union.
We will become rule takers for, as far as I can see, a very, very long time. And how does that help the people who want Britain to serve them better?
Brexit could only ever have been like that, either pointless or disruptive. The EU is constrained in what it can give. It is offering market access and rule-taking or no deal. The question is not, is it a good deal? Is the deal so bad that it's worth risking no deal?
If we can get away from this awful Brexit deal, which actually I have to contend as a Brexiteer, leaves us in a far weaker position as a nation than we would have been if we'd voted to remain in that referendum. We'll have the ability to negotiate our own trade agreements.
If we want to trade with the EU, some of our standards will have to mirror those that the EU is maintaining. But also, if we want to strike deals with other parts of the world, how hampered will we be by having to stick to those standards?
I don't see why we would be hampered, because in some areas those standards are good. But what we need is the flexibility to actually mirror those standards on a global scale.
Ronan, you were shaking your head.
Tariffs are one thing, but actually probably more worrying for Britain is mutual recognition and common standards, because it doesn't matter that if in fact Britain has the same standards as the EU, once they're out of the single market, then there's no longer the obligation on other EU states to recognise those standards as equivalent.
We buy far more from the European Union, buy from us. It is going to be in their interests. And if I'm sorry, if we leave with a no deal, were we to leave with a no deal, I sincerely believe that we would have a deal very quickly within 12 months.
The German car industry and the German business industry have said to Angela Merkel, the integrity of the single market is more important than the fact that we sell more cars to Britain. So it's a fantasy to think that the German car makers or Italian Prosecco makers are going to make Britain get a cherry-picked deal.
We are now going to be in a position that's so much worse, because the political declaration that sits alongside the withdrawal agreeing might as well be a letter to Father Christmas.
I think if the Prime Minister's deal is voted down and she's unable to get it through, I'm increasingly of the view that a second referendum is the only way through this.
It has surprised me, probably not, Professor, that people have not been more alarmed about no deal. Actually, what we discovered was that there is a vast sway of that 38–40% who would vote no deal tomorrow if we did have a public vote, because their perception is that no deal means remaining. And we discovered that by going out and engaging with people all around the country.
One of the surveys that certainly stood out to me was that if if you put no deal versus Remain, no deal is ahead of Remain. If you put May's deal ahead of no deal, May's deal is ahead, but only slightly. I would not want to make a call as to how a second referendum would play out. We have seen something remarkable in the past 2 years, which is a public opinion climate that has remained remarkably static. We are as polarised as we could be.